We want to have your take on the civil war in Yemen, which continues to rage despite diplomatic efforts to halt the fighting. Yesterday, UN envoy Martin Griffiths expressed optimism to the Security Council that an agreement can be reached even as Saudi-backed government forces press their offensive against Iran-supported Houthi rebels in the key port of Hodeidah. The
main casualty of the Yemen conflict has been its civilian population, with over 50,000 killed, 3 million displaced, and most urgently, a cholera epidemic estimated to have infected over 1 million, with millions more at risk. Especially hard hit have been Yemen's children. Earlier, we spoke with Dr. Meritxell Relano, Yemen representative of the UN Children's Fund UNICEF based in Sana'a, and asked her if she shared the optimism for a truce that was expressed by Griffiths.
Well, I am optimistic also because we need the parties to the conflict to allow for a humanitarian pause so that we can deliver the medical supplies needed in Hodeidah, because we need to deliver hygiene kits to the population that is internally displaced, deliver the services for the population that is being now suffering for more than 3 weeks. But in addition, we need this humanitarian pause in order to vaccinate almost the population that is around the Hodeidah city of cholera. Cholera was very high in Hodeidah last year, in the last year outbreak, and so we cannot allow not to have this population vaccinated. And therefore, I am optimistic, and I hope that this humanitarian pause remains so we can vaccinate the population.
We also asked Dr. Relano about the consequences if a ceasefire is not reached soon in Yemen.
Well, that would be a catastrophe, starting by Hodeidah, because more than 100,000 children would be affected. In Hodeidah is where the majority of the cases of malnutrition and severe acute malnutrition are happening. As I mentioned, it was an area with very high rate of cholera last year, cases of diarrhea, other diseases, lack of food. So it's a very hard-hit area in any case. So if there was active fighting and we are not able to deliver the health, the education, the nutrition, and the protection services, many children could die, and we cannot afford this.
Back to our Nina Larsen in New York. And Nina, the war in Yemen seems to have been slightly forgotten when we look at the war in Syria. Are we seeing today a chance for a breakthrough in negotiations?
Well, it certainly looks like there's a slim hope here, a glimmer of hope from UN Special Envoy Martin Griffiths. He's been conducting very intense shuttle diplomacy over the past several weeks between all the warring parties. And he briefed the Security Council yesterday, and his language was really quite positive. He said that all sides have concrete plans for some kind of resolution. It seems that people are just being realistic now. The rebels cannot sustain this. The UAE and Saudi forces, they're very aware at the very bad reputation they're getting around the world for the continued bombing of hospitals and areas that are affecting civilians. Everybody can see. And I think this is the big difference between Yemen and Syria. Yes, it's absolutely catastrophic, but the difference is we can talk to people like UNICEF inside Yemen at the moment. The internet is still working sufficiently to conduct an interview like that on the ground. The media is in there now and again. That's the big difference here. That's the only way you can really compare the two. Lord only knows what's going on in Syria at the moment on the ground, because no one can really get in there to show those kind of pictures and these kind of interviews. But certainly with Yemen, it has the world's attention. It has the focus of the United Nations. They're allowing, and again, this is the big difference from Syria, they are allowing the UN envoy into the country. And the same cannot be said for anyone that wants to broker peace in Syria from the United Nations, as Russia and the regime dominate everything on the ground. So I think it's just very key to see that UNICEF is indeed still functioning and that we can get this kind of access.
Nina, there was a quote today from the Yemeni government prime minister saying that we can regain control of the entire country. Is there a danger that the success they seem to be having in Hodeidah will encourage the Saudis and the Yemeni government to push ahead rather than trying to reach some kind of ceasefire?
Quite possibly, especially if the rebels stand down and allow the UN to take control of Hodeidah. But again, Yemen has been such a quagmire. There are so many different forces at play there. But as you said, Caleb, they have the might of the coalition there, the Saudi Air Force, the UAE Air Force, very, very formidable powers there that are supporting that entity. So I think anything could happen. Also, we have to remember that Iran is somewhat weakened at the moment on the world stage, and they're the prime backers of the Houthis. It does seem like the Houthis are somehow realizing that they might not have the strength of backing that they had even a few weeks ago.
That's an excellent point about Iran, Nina. And of course, we saw these demonstrations in Iran last week, protesters even mentioning the Iranian support for Houthi rebels at a time when the domestic economic situation in Iran seems to be worsening.